we are beginning a new unit, and that unit is titled The Struggle for Freedom. And the struggle for freedom is not something that only remains in the past, but it's an ongoing process. It's part of the process of human history, which is ongoing. And people have been struggling for freedom in the past, and people are still struggling for freedom this very day, in case you did not know it. And we're going to be selections that deal with that struggle. And what better way to begin with than with another speech? But this time, what in my opinion is the greatest speech ever given in the United States. The speech that was given by Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. It's titled, I Have a Dream. How many of you have ever heard of this or have heard, not of, but have heard the speech before? Have you heard it? Anyone? You have, okay. And this speech is uh, longer than anything we've already read for good reason. It's an excellent, beautiful speech. It's an iconic speech. It's very reminiscent of the one given by President Abraham Lincoln 100 years earlier. The speech was given in 1963 at the height of the civil rights movement. Does anybody know anything about the civil rights movement? What do you know about that movement? Well, for us to understand the power and the necessity of a speech like this one, we need to have some background information. We need to know what was going on. What's the context for the speech? Why was this speech given? After the Emancipation Proclamation in 1863, Blacks were free. There were no slaves anymore. And Blacks live happily ever after. Is that true?
No.
No, that's not true. Some people resented the fact that Blacks were not slave anymore, especially the slave owners. The slave owners were like, oh, so now you're passing from being my property to be my equal. The hell was that? That's not going to happen. And what was enacted in the southern United States was something called the Jim Crow laws. Have you ever heard of the Jim Crow laws? Jim Crow. The Jim Crow laws were laws designed to punish Black people just for being Black. Because some people could not deal with the fact that Blacks, like any other color, are human beings, and that we're all the same from that point of view. So they created laws to oppress minorities, Black people and people that were not white. I'm talking Hispanics like you and me, any people of color, brown people, Black people, Asians, you name it. And these laws went around punishing people that were not white for not being white. What does Rosa Parks have to do with any of this? Well, Rosa Parks is Black. One day she came out of work. She had worked 2 shifts. She was dead tired. But like your mommy, probably after work, she had to go home to work some more. And she was supposed to cook dinner for the family. So after work, she went to the grocery store. She shopped around for groceries because she had meals to make. So she gets on a bus. She's on her way home. This is happening in 1955 in the city of Montgomery in Alabama. And on her way home, the bus stops and a white man gets on board the bus and demands to have her seat. In the bus line, the Montgomery bus line, there was a rule that said that if you were Black and a white person asked for your seat, you had to give him your seat. How did that sound to you guys? Sound fair to you?
No.
Fair to you. Why does it not sound fair to you?
Because I mean, that's not fair because it doesn't matter the color, the skin color of the person. That's actually like racist. Like, why would you like do that? That's not okay.
It's not fair because it's not fair. If you pay your fare, your bus fare, and another person of a different race pays the same amount of money that you paid, you both paid. And the only important thing here is the color of your money, not the color of your skin. And money is green, right? Whether it comes from a white hand, whether it comes from a brown hand, whether it comes from a black hand. So Rosa Parks was not hitching a ride. She paid for her ride, but the bus fare didn't matter. What mattered was that she was black, and the rule said that if you were black, you had to give your chair to a white person. What shocks me is how much of a gentleman this guy was. You think it would ever occur to me to ask for a lady to stand up and give me her chair? And that wasn't the time where there was supposed to be gentlemen, which I find shocking. But Rosa Parks was dead tired, as I told you. And what came out of her mouth was something that is not supposed to come out of the mouth of no black person. You know what she said?
But
No. Those are the words that white people hate hearing from a black person or a colored person. No. And the guy couldn't believe that she said no. So he raised up hell. He started cussing at her and he made a ruckus. He made a show. Bus driver stopped the bus because he was concerned to hear that ruckus, hear that racket. And he went to the back of the bus to see what was going on. And when he heard that Rosa Parks had dared to say no, he started raising up hell also, and he called the cops on her. The cops. Can you believe that? The cops arrived, and guess what? They arrested her. What? Yes, you heard correctly. They arrested her.
that's
So-
just stupid. That's just stupid.
You could call it that too. I can call it a number of things, but I can call it that too. So they threw the book at her. What did that mean? They took her fingerprints. And I think that her most famous photo is her mugshot. So if you ever go to Google and you Google her image, Rosa Parks, chances are that the first photo that you're going to see is her mugshot. Yeah. But the question is that the first time that had ever happened? And the answer is no, it was not the first time. But you know what? If you take a cup and you start dropping little drops of whatever liquid, there's going to come a time where that cup is going to run over. And you know what it takes for that cup to run over? One drop. And Rosa Parks, what happened to her was that drop that made the cup run over. People had it. People were mad. And they were going to do something about it. They were not going to put that kind of stuff anymore. So they had a meeting at a church that Sunday. And they invited over a guy called Martin Luther King, a young Baptist minister. And they wanted to make a plan. Because they had to respond to, how do we respond to this? And Dr. King said, well, let's hit him where it hurts. And where would it hurt if you're a company? They hit you where? If you're a company, your whole purpose of existing is to do what? What do companies exist for?
To help.
To help? Help who?
I'm not sure. I
To
mean,
help
it's just
who?
the people.
What people?
The people in this world.
No. Try to
I don't
help
get the
themselves.
question.
Help themselves, madam. They're there to make money. That's the whole reason for
Okay,
their
I get it
existence.
now.
They're there to make money. They're helping
Sales and stuff.
their stockholders. It's make money. So how do you hurt them? How do you hurt these people? by not letting them make money. You hit them in the pocket. So what did they decide to do? Okay, since most black people, didn't own a car and they had to take the bus, they decided that from now on they were going to walk to work every day, not take the bus, even if it was inconvenient, even if it meant that they had to wake up earlier and walk many miles to get to work. That's exactly what they were going to do. They were not going to give a penny to a company that treated them the way they were being treated. And Monday arrived, and the buses were going around almost empty with a few random white people, no black people on board the buses. And the bus line thought it would stop, it would end, but it didn't stop. And days passed and weeks passed. And the bus line still had to pay gasoline for the buses to move around. They still had to pay their mechanics and their drivers, but people were not using their services. So what's going on now?
They're
What do you think is
basically
happening?
just
What?
they're basically just what would you call it? Like protesting the bus, so now they're
Yeah,
paying
but
for nothing.
what's happening to the company?
It's gonna
They're losing money.
bankrupt.
They're losing money. They're losing money. So they're being hurt. And they had to make a choice. We either cater to our customers by being fair, or the company disappears. So guess what happened? A few weeks later, the bus line announced that they were going to drop those stupid rules that they had against black people, like that you're supposed to sit in this specific chair designed for black people. All this was part of what is known as segregation. And I think we spoke about segregation before. That's part of Jim Crow laws. And segregation was designed to keep black people or minorities separate from white people. So you couldn't go to the same school, you couldn't go to the same restaurants, you could not have access to the same kind of services, and you did not have the same privileges, even though you were supposed to be paying taxes just like white people. So that's what the civil rights movement was all about, guys. And as I said, the peak of that movement was when Dr. Martin Luther King gave this speech, beautiful, wonderful speech titled, "I Have a Dream." So today you're supposed to read the speech. You can see it in its entirety in YouTube. It's wonderful, like 17 minutes long. Brianna, could you please read this for us?
This world that we live in would be perfect if there were less prejudice and people who think they are better than others.
You agree with that?
Yes.
So do I, right? The world would be not a perfect place, but it will be a lot better if people started thinking they're better than others and being less prejudicial. You know what the word prejudicial means, right? Prejudice. To prejudge. And this is something we're all guilty of. We look at people, we don't know them, but we cast judgment. Does that sound fair to you?
We judge a book by its cover.
Exactly. You don't do that with people. You don't do that. I mean, it doesn't mean you don't judge people. That would be ridiculous, right? That would be stupid. We're supposed to make judgments, but a judgment is supposed to be what?
We make assumptions of people that we don't know.
I'm sorry?
We make assumptions by
Okay, you were lagging there, but thanks for what you're saying. We should not, as you said, judge a book by its cover, because sometimes we can make the wrong kind of judgment. Our judgments should always be fair. In this selection, guys, you're being presented with the new academic vocabulary. I remind you that the academic vocabulary are the words that you will be studying throughout the unit. These belong to unit number 2. You're going to use them to complete the unit task at the end of this unit, where you're going to be working on a research report. And you're going to have to be using these words in that research report. The words are decline, enable, impose, and integrate. So those are words that you have plenty of time to get acquainted with. the essential question that will be guiding every single selection that you guys read in this unit is, how do people find freedom in the midst of oppression? And I would like to ask you this question that is in the book. I would like for you to react to it. Have you ever been treated differently for any reason? And how did it make you feel? Think about that for a moment. Have you ever been treated differently for any reason? How did it make you feel? To give you a little bit of background, that's a photo of Martin Luther King Jr. And the I Have a Dream speech is a public speech that was delivered by him in August 28, 1963, during a march on Washington, D.C. for jobs and freedom, which was calling for civil and economic rights and for the end to the rampant racism that was going on during that time in the United States. And it is still going on, not as much as back in 1963, but it still is. This speech has become one of the defining moments in the civil rights movement, and it's one of the most iconic speeches in American history. Let's watch a video about the movement.
A century after the end of the Civil War and the dawn of Reconstruction, African Americans still found themselves fighting for their basic rights as citizens. The modern civil rights movement in the mid-20th century finally secured them.
Most historians actually date the start of the formal civil rights movement to Brown versus Board of Education. Brown really stokes the fervor of the nation. Then, in December of 1955, Rosa Parks decided as an act of resistance that she would not give up her seat to a white man on the bus.
Rosa Parks' deliberate act of resistance led to a bus boycott that thrust into the limelight a young preacher with a PhD. He would become one of the movement's most charismatic leaders. His name was the Reverend Dr. Martin Luther King Jr.
One of the most iconic moments is the March on Washington in 1963, led by Martin Luther King Jr.
200,000 people converge on the nation's capital to rally for civil rights. They come united in one cause.
One day right now in Alabama, little black boys and black girls will be able to join hands with little white boys and white girls as sisters and brothers. I have a dream today.
This becomes visualized on the news and begins to change the way that Americans are starting to think about the civil rights movement.
As the civil rights movement attained greater visibility, it was often met with increased brutality and violence. Yet in the midst of so much sacrifice and heartbreak, the work of civil rights activists began to bear fruit.
In 1964, President Lyndon Johnson signs the Civil Rights Act of '64, and that's designed to desegregate businesses and government employment. And then in 1965, President Johnson signs the Voting Rights Act of '65.
The passage of the Voting Rights Act was a monumental victory for African Americans. Tragically, just 3 years after it was passed, Dr. King would be assassinated. Many feel looking back that the movement died that day, but in fact, the movement took on new forms and continued. And it must continue today as important victories such as the Voting Rights Act are under attack.
Until we deal with the fact that the backlash is often made possible not just by the other side growing in power, but by those who claim to care about equality losing their own resolve. There will be moments of this cycle happening over and over again.
You're going to be reading that speech today, that groundbreaking speech by Dr. Martin Luther King. There's some critical vocabulary words that you will hear in the speech that you have to acquaint yourself with. These words are default, desolate, degenerate, inextricably, and redemptive. As with the other speeches that we already covered, you will see the use of rhetorical devices, just like in the speech given by Abraham Lincoln and the other speech given at the Oklahoma Memorial Service by Bill Clinton. The speech contains repetition, To emphasize key ideas, it contains parallelism, which is used to evoke emotions, and it contains an extended metaphor. Remember that a while ago we were talking about figurative language, and we know what a metaphor is. It is a comparison between two unlike things, but in this case, it is extended throughout the entire speech. The assessment begins on page 95 and it ends on page 98. The only activities that you need to complete include check your understanding, critical vocabulary, analyze the text, vocabulary strategy, and language conventions, parallel structures. This work needs to be uploaded in the next 24 hours. Any question, guys? Any question?